"Dance with me now," said the Mafia boss, but the waitress insisted she was working. Jason Miller leaned across the marble desk and told the private investigator to make Emily Carter's life unlivable, and he said it the way another man might order coffee. Find where she works. Find who she talks to. Make the people who trust her stop trusting her. He wanted her frightened, isolated, begging. He had spent 2 years hunting the one woman who had ever walked away from him, and tonight he had finally found her pouring champagne in a Chicago restaurant, smiling at strangers. That smile, he decided, would be the first thing he took. Before we go on, if stories about ordinary people finding the courage to stand up for themselves move you the way they move me, please subscribe to this channel and stay with me all the way to the end, because this one turns in ways you will not see coming. And tell me in the comments what city you are watching from tonight so I can see how far this story has traveled. Emily Carter had a rule, and the rule had kept her alive. Never let anyone with power look at you twice. She had learned it the hard way, and she carried it into Bella Vita every evening the way other women carried their keys. Head down, orders memorized, feet moving. If a man in an expensive suit asked her name, she gave him the smallest, politest answer she could and moved on before he could turn a question into a conversation. Conversations were how it started. She knew that better than anyone. At 26, she had already survived more than most people twice her age, and she had promised herself that the survival was the whole point now. Not happiness, not love, just the quiet, unremarkable safety of a life nobody noticed. "Table 9 wants the wine list again," said Rosa, sliding past her in the narrow hallway behind the kitchen. "And table 12 is asking for you by name." "By name?" Emily stopped. "Nobody asks for me by name." Rosa gave her a look. "The man in the private section does." Emily felt something tighten in her chest, an old reflex, the body remembering fear before the mind caught up. "Which man?" "You know which man." She did know. Everyone at Bella Vita knew. Damian Moretti came every Friday. He sat in the private dining section at the same corner table, and the entire staff rearranged itself around his presence, like water moving around a stone. The manager spoke softly when he was in the building. The owner himself came out to shake his hand. There were stories about him whispered in the kitchen, half of them probably invented, that he ran half the city from behind closed doors, that men who crossed him disappeared, that the police left him alone because someone above the police told them to. Emily believed maybe a quarter of it, but she believed enough to keep her distance. "Tell him I'll bring the check when he's ready," she said. "He already paid. He wants to talk to you." "I don't talk to customers." Rosa's voice dropped. "Emily, you don't say no to that one. Nobody says no to that one." And that Emily thought was exactly the problem. She smoothed her apron, took a breath, and walked toward the private section anyway, because the only thing more dangerous than talking to a man like Damian Moretti was making him wonder why you wouldn't. He was sitting alone, which surprised her. She had expected the usual crowd, the men in dark coats who stood near his table and watched the room. Tonight there was just him, one glass of red wine untouched in front of him, and an expression on his face she could not read. "You wanted something," she said, not a question. She kept her hands folded in front of her. Damian looked up. He had the kind of face that had learned to give away nothing, and yet when he looked at her, something in it eased, as if he had been waiting a long time and was relieved she had finally come. "I wanted to ask you a question," he said, "and I want you to answer it honestly, which I understand is not something people usually do around me. I have 4 other tables." "Then I'll be quick." He turned the wine glass slowly by its stem. 3 months ago, a woman at table 6 choked on a piece of bread. Do you remember?" Emily blinked. She had not expected that. "You were the only person in this room who moved," Damian went on. "The managers froze. The other servers froze. You were behind her before anyone understood what was happening, and you knew exactly what to do. And when it was over, when she was breathing again and crying and thanking everyone, you slipped back into the kitchen before anybody could thank you. Why?" Emily said nothing for a moment. "Because it wasn't about being thanked," she finally said. "She needed help. I helped, that's all." "That's not all." His voice was quiet, certain. "I've watched you for months. You cover for the younger girls when they make mistakes. You remember every regular's order, even the ones who are rude to you. You give the leftover bread to the man who sleeps behind the building, and you do it after your shift so no one sees. You do 100 kind things a week, and you make sure not one of them is witnessed." He paused. "I want to understand why a person works so hard to be invisible." The words landed somewhere deep, somewhere she kept locked, and Emily felt her careful composure crack for half a second before she sealed it again. "You've been watching me," she said. "That's what you're telling me. You've been watching me for months." "I notice things. It's kept me alive. It's also," she said evenly, "the kind of thing that frightens women." She expected him to bristle. Men with power did not like being told they were frightening. They liked to believe their attention was a gift. Instead, Damien went very still. Then he nodded slowly, as if she had told him something true that no one had ever dared say to his face. "You're right," he said. "I apologize. That was thoughtless of me." And that, more than anything, was what undid her a little. Not the compliments, the apology. She could not remember the last time a powerful man had said the words, "I apologize," to her and meant them. "I have 4 tables," she said again, quieter this time. "Go," he said. "Take care of them." She turned to leave. She had almost made it back to the safety of the kitchen when he spoke once more, not loudly, just enough. "You protect everyone, Miss Carter. I only wondered who protects you." She did not answer. She could not. She walked into the kitchen, set down her tray, and stood for a moment with both hands braced on the steel counter, breathing. Nobody had asked her that question in a very long time. The truth was that no one protected her, and no one ever had, and she had built her entire life around the belief that this was safer. When you needed no one could take anything from you. When you expected nothing, no one could break a promise. She had learned these lessons from a man named Jason Miller, and she had paid for the education with 3 years of her life. She did not know, standing in that kitchen with her hands shaking, that Jason had spent the last 2 years looking for her. But she would know soon. The charity event was 2 weeks later, and Bella Vita transformed for it. The owner had rented out the entire second floor, a grand room that was only opened for the most important nights, and the guest list read like a directory of everyone in Chicago who mattered. Politicians, old money, new money. And at his usual corner holding court, whether he wanted to or not, Damien Moretti. Emily worked the floor with a tray of champagne, and she was good at it, weaving through the crowd, offering glasses, disappearing before anyone could remember her face. She liked nights like this, strangely. The bigger the crowd, the more invisible she became. A single waitress in a sea of 200 guests was nothing. She was furniture that moved. She was refilling her tray near the bar when a voice she had spent 2 years trying to forget slid up behind her. "You cut your hair?" Emily's entire body went cold. She turned slowly, and there he was. Jason Miller in a tailored gray suit, a glass of scotch in his hand, smiling the smile that had once made her believe he loved her. He looked exactly the same. That was the worst part. He had gotten to keep his easy charm, his good looks, his effortless confidence, while she had spent years rebuilding herself from the pieces he left behind. "You look good, Em," he said. "Tired, but good. Waitressing suits you. Very humble." "What are you doing here?" Her voice came out flat. She was proud of that. Her hands were shaking, but her voice was flat. "I'm a guest." He gestured lazily at the room. "My family gives a great deal of money to this particular charity. I've been coming for years. Imagine my surprise." His eyes moved over her uniform, slow and deliberate. "All this time I've been wondering where you ran off to, and here you are carrying drinks for people like me. I want you to leave me alone." "See, that's interesting?" Jason took a slow sip of his scotch. "Because I've spent a lot of money finding you, Emily. A lot of money. And people don't spend money like that on someone they intend to leave alone." Every instinct in her body screamed at her to run, to put down the tray and walk out the back door and never come back. And she almost did. But she had run once from her whole life, and she was so tired of running. "You don't own me," she said. "You never did. Whatever you think you're here to collect, there's nothing. There was never anything." Jason's smile did not move, but something behind his eyes shifted, and she remembered that shift. She remembered what came after it. "You embarrassed me," he said softly. And now there was no charm in it at all. "You know that, do you have any idea what it looked like, my fiancé vanishing in the middle of the night like a thief? The questions I had to answer, my mother still asks about you. My business partners still whisper. You made me look like a man who couldn't hold on to his own woman." He leaned closer, and his voice dropped to something almost gentle, which was how she knew it was a threat. "I'm not going to hurt you, Em. I would never. I just want to fix what you broke. I want to bring you home where people can see that everything is fine, that we're fine, that I'm fine." "I am home," she said. "This is my home now. This is my life. This—" He glanced at the tray of champagne in her hands and laughed a short, disbelieving sound. "This isn't a life, sweetheart. This is hiding. And you and I both know you can't hide forever. All it takes is one word to the right people. One phone call. You know how easily a reputation can be built. You watched me build a few. You watched me take a few apart." He tilted his head. "Do you really want me to start telling people the truth about you? The version of it that I decide is the truth?" And there it was, the old machinery whirring back to life. Jason had never needed to raise a hand. He hurt people with words, with connections, with the slow, careful destruction of everything they had built. He had done it to a business rival once. He had done it to a friend who crossed him. She had watched back when she still thought his power was a kind of safety, before she understood it was a kind of prison. "You should go," she said. "There are important people here. You wouldn't want a scene." "No," Jason agreed pleasantly. "I wouldn't. Would you?" He knew she couldn't make one. He knew she couldn't scream, couldn't throw the drink in his face, couldn't do a single one of the things a braver woman might do, because a waitress who makes a scene at a charity event loses her job by morning. And Jason had always been an expert at understanding exactly how much power the people beneath him did not have. She turned to walk away. He caught her wrist. It was not hard enough to hurt. That was the thing people never understood about men like Jason. He never had to hurt you. His fingers closed around her wrist, loose, casual, and the message underneath was total. "I can touch you whenever I want. You cannot stop me. This room full of important people will not see it, and if they did, they would believe me, and not you." "Let go," Emily whispered. "Come find me before the night's over," Jason said, ignoring her. "We'll talk properly, for old time's sake. And Emily," he smiled, "don't make me come looking again. I've done enough looking." "Is there a problem here?" The voice was quiet, and it did not need to be loud, because the moment it spoke, 3 separate conversations nearby went silent. Damien Moretti stood a few feet away with his hands in his pockets, and he was looking at Jason's hand on Emily's wrist with an expression of mild, almost pleasant curiosity, the way a man might look at a spider he had not yet decided to step on. Jason let go of her wrist. He did it slowly, unbothered, but he did it. "No problem," Jason said. "Old friends catching up." "Is that true?" Damien asked. He was not looking at Jason. He was looking at Emily. "Are you catching up with an old friend?" Emily looked at him, and for one terrible second she wanted to say yes, because saying yes was safe, because saying yes meant the powerful man in front of her would nod and move on, and she could handle Jason herself the way she had always handled everything herself. She had learned never to ask for help. Help came with a price. Help was how they got their hooks in you. But she was so tired. "No," she said. "He's not a friend." Something changed in Damien's face. Not anger, not exactly. It was colder than anger and much more still. "I see," he said. He turned to Jason at last. "You'll want to enjoy the rest of your evening somewhere else." Jason laughed. It was the laugh of a man who had never once in his life been afraid of another man, because his weapons were lawyers and money and whispers, not fists, and he did not yet understand what kind of person he was speaking to. "And who exactly are you?" Jason said. "The manager. Should I tip you?" Somewhere near the bar, a man in a dark coat took a single step forward, and the owner of Bella Vita, who had been laughing with a senator across the room, went pale and started moving quickly through the crowd toward them. "Damien!" the owner said, arriving breathless, wringing his hands. "Damien, please, is everything. Is there anything I can please, whatever you need?" Jason's smile faltered for the first time. "Damien," he repeated slowly. He looked at the owner's face, at the sudden fear in it, at the man in the dark coat, at the way the room had quietly rearranged itself. And Jason Miller, who prided himself on always knowing exactly who held the power in any room, understood that for once he had misjudged it badly. "Damien Moretti," he said. "Now you have it," Damien said mildly. Jason recovered fast. She had to give him that. He always recovered fast. "My apologies," Jason said smoothly, setting down his glass. "I didn't realize the waitress was under your protection. I'll show myself out." He glanced at Emily, and in that glance was a promise. "This isn't over. You just made it worse. Emily, we'll finish our conversation another time." He walked away through the crowd, unhurried, a man who wanted everyone to see he was leaving on his own terms. And Emily stood there, still holding a tray of champagne, her wrist tingling where he had held it, and felt the old dread pooling in her stomach, because she knew Jason Miller, and she knew that a man like him did not walk away from anything. He only stepped back to gather more of himself. "You're shaking," Damien said quietly. "I'm fine." "You're not." He said it without judgment. "Set the tray down. You've done enough carrying for one night." "I have tables." "You have a manager who is currently so frightened of me that he will give you the rest of the night off and thank you for the privilege." Damien's mouth moved into something that was almost but not quite a smile. "Set the tray down, Miss Carter." She did not set the tray down. She held it tighter, and she looked him in the eye, because if she had learned one thing in her life, it was that the moment you let a powerful man start deciding things for you, you never got the deciding back. "I appreciate what you did," she said carefully. "I do. But I don't need to be told when to stop working. I don't need to be managed. And I don't need another man deciding what's best for me. I've had enough of those to last a lifetime." She watched him closely, waiting for the flicker of irritation, the small tightening around the eyes that men got when a woman beneath them refused their generosity. She had seen it 1,000 times. Help was never really free. There was always a bill, and the bill was always your gratitude, your compliance, your understanding that you now owed them something. But Damien Moretti did not tighten. He looked at her the way he had looked at her that first night, as if she had said something true that no one else had the nerve to say, and slowly he inclined his head. "Understood," he said. "Then work if that's what you want. But do me one small favor and drink a glass of water in the kitchen first. Not because I'm telling you to, because your hands are shaking and you'll drop the tray, and then you really will lose your job, and I'll have to stand here and pretend I didn't cause it." Despite everything, despite the fear still crawling through her, Emily felt a strange, unexpected pull at the corner of her mouth. It was not quite a smile, but it was close. "That's fair," she admitted. "I'm occasionally fair," he said. "It surprises people." She went to the kitchen. She drank the water. And when she came back out, her hands had steadied, and she finished her shift because she had told him she would, and because finishing was the one thing she had always been able to do, no matter what was chasing her. But she could feel him watching the whole rest of the night. Not the way Jason watched, like an owner counting his possessions. Damien watched the way a man watches a door. He is afraid someone might come through. He watched the exits. He watched the crowd. He watched, she slowly realized, for Jason, in case Jason came back. And near the end of the night, when the crowd had thinned and the band was packing up and she was clearing the last of the abandoned glasses, Damien crossed the room and stood in front of her one more time. There was music still playing, soft and slow, the last song before the lights came up. He held out his hand. "Dance with me," he said. It was not a command. She noticed that immediately, and it mattered more than she could have explained. Every other time a man had asked her for anything, it had been dressed as a request, but built like an order. This was not that. His hand was open, and his eyes were open, and if she said no, she understood somehow that he would simply lower his hand, and that would be the end of it. No punishment, no cost. And precisely because it was a real question, she was able to give a real answer. She looked at the tray of dirty glasses in her hands. She looked at her uniform still stained from a long night. She looked at the man in front of her, the most feared man in the city, holding out his hand to a waitress as if she were the most important person in the room. "I'm working," she said. The words hung in the air. For a long moment, nobody around them breathed. The owner, watching from across the room, actually put a hand to his chest. A dance was not a small thing to refuse a man like Damian Moretti. People had been ruined for smaller slights. She had just told the most powerful man in Chicago no in front of a room over something as simple as a dance. And Damian Moretti, who had not been told no by anyone in longer than he could remember, stood there with his hand still half extended, and he began very quietly to laugh. It was not a cruel laugh. It was not the laugh of a man deciding how to punish her. It was surprised and warm, and something underneath it sounded almost like relief, as if for the first time in years someone had treated him like a man instead of a threat, and he had forgotten how good that felt. "You're working," he repeated. "Yes, of course you are." He lowered his hand exactly as she had known he would. "Then I won't keep you from it." He turned to go, and Emily, watching the most dangerous man in the city walk away from her because she had asked him to, felt something she had not felt in years, something she did not have a name for, something that frightened her far more than Jason Miller ever had. She felt seen. Not wanted, not owned, not managed, seen as a person, as someone whose no meant something, as someone whose work, whose small, stubborn dignity was worth respecting instead of overriding. She almost called him back. The word almost formed on her lips. She didn't. She had learned a long time ago, and at great cost, exactly how dangerous it was to let a powerful man in, and no single kind evening could unlearn a lesson that had nearly destroyed her. So she watched him leave, and she finished clearing the glasses, and she told herself it was over, that the strange gravity between them was just the adrenaline of a frightening night, that a man like that would forget a waitress by morning. She was wrong about that. She was wrong about a lot of things that night. Because as she was gathering her things to go home, one of the younger servers, a girl named Katie, who was barely 19, found her by the coat rack, and Katie's face was pale. "Emily," Katie whispered. "That man, the one in the gray suit who left early, he was asking questions." Emily went still. "What kind of questions?" "He was talking to Mr. Peterson." Peterson was the manager. "He was being real friendly about it, real casual, but he was asking about you. How long you'd worked here, whether you had any references when you got hired, whether anyone had ever checked your background." Katie swallowed. "And he gave Mr. Peterson a card. He said if anything ever comes up about her, anything at all, you'll want to know the truth first. And then he left." Emily closed her eyes. She knew that move. She knew it the way you know the sound of a door you've heard slammed 100 times. Jason was not going to come at her with his fists or his money, not directly, not yet. He was going to do what he always did. He was going to make the people around her doubt her. He was going to plant one small seed of a question in the mind of every person she depended on. And then he was going to water it patiently until the people who had trusted her looked at her differently, until her boss started watching her, until the safe, little, invisible life she had built began quietly to come apart at every seam. He had done it to her before in the old life. He had convinced her own friends that she was unstable, that she imagined things, that she needed him to take care of her because she couldn't be trusted to take care of herself. By the time she left, half the people she loved had believed she was the problem, and the belief had made it so much harder to run, because who runs from the man everyone insists is saving them? He was starting the same thing again, right here, in the one place she had thought was hers. "Emily," Katie's voice was small. "Are you okay? Do you want me to tell Mr. Peterson it isn't true? Whatever that man was saying?" "No," Emily said. Her voice was steady again, the way it always got steady when the fear was worst, some deep old survival instinct flattening everything out. "Don't say anything. If you defend me before there's an accusation, it just makes people wonder what there is to defend. That's how he works. He wants you to react. Don't." Katie stared at her. "How do you know all that?" Emily looked at the young girl's frightened, honest face, and she thought about all the ways she could answer, and she chose the smallest, truest one. "Because I used to belong to him," she said, "and it took me 3 years to stop." She took her coat. She walked out into the Chicago cold, and as she stood on the sidewalk pulling her collar up against the wind, she saw parked across the street a black car she did not recognize, and behind its windshield the faint red glow of a cigarette and the shape of a man simply sitting there, watching the door she had just come out of. She could not see his face. She did not need to. She had spent 2 years believing she had finally gotten away, that she had built something too small and too quiet for Jason Miller to ever find. And in a single evening, both truths of her new life had walked through the same door on the same night. A man who had asked her to dance and accepted her no like it was a gift, and a man from her past who did not believe the word no existed. She turned and walked the other way faster now, her heart pounding, and she did not look back at the black car because she knew that looking back was what they wanted. That fear was the whole point, that a frightened woman was a controllable woman. But she was not the same woman who had run 2 years ago. She had spent 2 years learning how to stand. And somewhere behind her, in an empty restaurant, a man named Damien Moretti was sitting alone at his corner table long after everyone else had gone, staring at a glass of wine he had not touched, thinking about a waitress who had told him no, and remembering for the first time in a very long time what it had felt like to be looked at as a man and not a monster. He did not yet know about Jason. He did not yet know that the woman who had refused to be saved was about to need, whether she wanted it or not, someone who understood exactly how dangerous the world could be. He would learn soon. They both would. The card sat on Peterson's desk for 3 days before Emily saw it, and when she finally did, she understood that Jason had already won the first move. She found it by accident, sliding a stack of reservation slips onto the manager's desk before her shift. It was a plain white business card, expensive stock, and it was propped against Peterson's phone, where he would see it every time he picked it up. Miller Consulting Group. And under the name in Jason's neat handwriting, 4 words. Ask her about Portland. Emily's stomach dropped. Please. Portland. There was no Portland. There had never been a Portland. It was nothing a word, a place she had no connection to, and that was exactly why it was so dangerous. Jason had not written a lie Peterson could check. He had written a question Peterson could not answer, and a question that cannot be answered grows in a person's mind like mold in a dark room. Peterson would look at her now and wonder, what happened in Portland? What is she hiding? Why did a wealthy man take the trouble to warn me? Emily. Peterson was in the doorway. She had not heard him come in. You're early. I always come in early, she said. She set the reservation slips down carefully next to the card, and she did not look at the card, because looking at it would tell him she had read it. You know that. Right. He rubbed the back of his neck. He was a decent man, Peterson tired and overworked and not cruel, and that was the tragedy of it, because decent, tired men were the easiest ones for Jason to turn. They did not need to be convinced you were guilty. They only needed to be made too uncomfortable to keep defending you. Emily, can I ask you something? Here it was. Of course, she said. That man the other night, the one in the gray suit, did you know him? 12 seconds. That was how long Emily had to decide what kind of truth to tell, and in those 12 seconds, she ran through every option, and every option was a trap, because Jason had built it that way. If she said no, she didn't know him, and Peterson ever learned otherwise, she was a liar. If she said yes, she knew him, then Peterson would ask how, and any honest answer led straight into the dark. And if she said too much, if she got emotional, if she explained, then she became exactly what Jason wanted her to look like. Unstable, dramatic. A woman with a complicated past that followed her into your restaurant. I knew him a long time ago, she said. Steady, flat, small. We're not in contact. I was surprised to see him. Peterson nodded slowly. He seemed to think there was something I should know about you. I'm sure he did. She met his eyes. Mr. Peterson, I've worked here 14 months. Have I ever given you a reason to doubt me? No, he admitted. No, you haven't. That's why I'm confused. Then maybe the question isn't about me, she said quietly. Maybe it's about a man who spends his money making people confused about someone who never did anything to him. It was the right thing to say. She saw it land. But she also saw that it was not enough that the seed was already planted, that Peterson would be watching her now in a way he had not watched her before, and there was nothing she could do about it except be perfect. And being perfect forever was exactly the prison Jason wanted to build. She got through her shift. She was good. She was fast. She smiled at every table, and the whole time she felt Peterson's eyes flick to her, and away, flick to her, and away. And by the end of the night, she was so tired from the effort of appearing normal that she could barely stand. Damien was not there that night. It was a Tuesday, not a Friday. And Emily was surprised, standing at the bus stop in the cold, to realize that some small part of her had wanted him to be. He came Friday, of course. He always came Friday. But this Friday was different, because this Friday he did not go to his corner table and wait for her to eventually pass by. He was waiting for her at the service entrance when she arrived for her shift, leaning against the brick wall in a dark coat, and the sight of him standing there in the alley, in the place where the staff came and went, sent a jolt of alarm through her before she understood it was him. "How do you know where the staff comes in?" she said. "I know a great many things I shouldn't." He straightened. "I need 90 seconds of your time, then I'll let you work. I'm going to be late." "You're 11 minutes early. You're always early. 90 seconds. She stopped. She folded her arms. "You've been asking about me again." "No," he said. "This time you're going to tell me yourself." He looked at her steadily. "Jason Miller, the man in the gray suit. I want to know what he is to you. And I want to know it from you, not from a file. Because whatever he is, he came back after I told him to leave. And men do not come back after I tell them to leave, unless they think they have something worth more than their safety. So, what does he think he has?" And Emily, who had spent 2 years telling no one anything, who had built her entire survival on the principle that a shared secret was a loaded gun handed to someone else, looked at this dangerous man in the alley and felt the strangest urge to simply put the gun down. She resisted it. "It's not your problem," she said. "You're right, it isn't." He didn't argue. That was the thing that kept catching her off guard, the way he never argued, never pushed, never used the weight he so obviously had. "But I've been alive a long time in a business that kills people who don't pay attention, and I'm paying attention now, and what I see is a man with money and a grudge circling a woman who thinks she has to fight him alone. I've watched that story before. I know how it ends when the woman is alone." He paused. "I'm not asking you to let me fight him. I'm asking you to let me understand what I'm looking at. There's a difference." There was a difference. She heard it. And it was that difference, that one small, honest distinction between wanting to fight for her and wanting to control her, that finally cracked her open. "He was my fiancé," she said. Damien did not react. He just listened. "3 years of my life," she went on. And now that she had started, the words came faster, like water through a break in a dam. "He never hit me. That's what nobody understands. Everyone thinks it has to be fists, and when it isn't fists, they think it wasn't real. Jason never raised a hand to me. He didn't have to. He controlled the money. He controlled who I saw. He'd tell my friends I was struggling, that I got confused, that I imagined things, and he said it so kindly, so worried, that they believed him, and pretty soon they were watching me for signs of the person he'd invented. By the end, I had nobody. He'd taken everyone, and a woman with nobody is a woman who can't leave, because where would she go, and who would believe her, and what would she even say? But you left. I left in the middle of the night with a backpack and $400. She said it without pride, just fact. I got on a bus. I got off in a city I'd never been to. I changed the way I looked. I stopped using my cards. I took a job where nobody asks too many questions of a girl who works hard and keeps her head down. And for 2 years it worked. Her voice caught just slightly, and she hated that it caught. And then he walked into my restaurant. How did he find you? I don't know. Money, probably. Money finds anything eventually. She looked at him. And now he's doing what he always does. He left a card on my manager's desk with a question written on it about a place I've never been. He's not going to accuse me of anything, because an accusation can be fought. He's just going to make everyone wonder. He's going to make my boss watch me. He's going to make the people I work with uneasy without ever knowing why. And in a month, maybe 2, I'll have a reputation I can't explain and can't defend, and I'll lose this job and I'll have to run again. That's the plan. That's always the plan. He doesn't want to destroy me all at once. He wants me to destroy myself, trying to prove I'm fine. For a long moment, Damien said nothing. Then very quietly, I could end this in a day. I know you could. One phone call. His investors get nervous. His accounts get complicated. The men he does business with start hearing that Jason Miller is a liability, and Jason Miller finds his whole comfortable life turning to sand under his feet, and he's far too busy saving himself to ever think about you again. He said it plainly, not as a boast, just a description of the weather. I could make him disappear from your life completely, and I wouldn't lose a minute of sleep over it. And there it was. The offer she had known was coming from the moment he first noticed her, the offer that always came from powerful men dressed up as kindness, waiting to become a leash. No, Emily said. Damien blinked. It was the closest she had ever seen him come to genuine surprise. No. She held his gaze. You want to know why? Because I've done this before. I let a man with power decide he was going to take care of my problems for me, decide what was best for me, decide who got to be in my life and who didn't. And it felt wonderful. It felt like being saved right up until the day I realized I couldn't do anything anymore without him. That's how it happens, Damien. It doesn't start with a cage. It starts with a man saying, let me handle that for you. It starts with relief. And you don't notice the walls going up because every single brick is something you were grateful for. Her voice was shaking now, but not from fear. I would rather lose this job fighting Jason my own way than keep it because another powerful man decided to keep it for me. I don't need another man handling my life. I've been handled. I barely survived it. The alley was silent, and what happened next was the thing Emily would think about for a long time afterward, because Damien Moretti feared throughout the city. A man who solved everything with the enormous machine of his power slowly closed his mouth on whatever he had been about to say and lowered his eyes, and when he looked back up at her, something in him had changed. No one has ever said that to me, he said. Said what? That my help was a cage. He shook his head slowly, and for the first time she saw not the Mafia boss, but the man, and the man looked almost lost. People beg me for it. Do you understand that grown men, powerful men, they come to me and they beg for exactly what I just offered you, and they call me generous, they call me merciful, and it never once occurred to me that the thing I was giving them was also a thing I was doing to them. He was quiet for a moment. You looked at the most valuable thing I have to offer anyone, and you saw a trap. Because I've been in the trap, Emily said gently. It looked exactly like a gift too. Damien was silent for a long time. All right, he finally said. All right. You don't want me to handle it? I heard you. He straightened, and something businesslike came back into his voice. But underneath it was a new carefulness, a man learning a language he had never needed before. So I won't handle it, but I'm going to offer you some things, and you're going to say yes or no to each one, and whatever you say, that's the end of it. No argument. No bricks. Deal. She hesitated. Deal. 1. There's an apartment building I own on the north side. Clean, safe, good locks, a doorman who actually pays attention. One of the units is empty. You could have it at whatever rent you're paying now. And no, I'm not going to reduce it because you'd hate that. So it's the same rent, just a safer building. Yes or no? Emily opened her mouth to say no on instinct and then stopped because she had promised herself she would actually listen. A safer building. Not a gift. Not free. Just safer. For the same money she already spent living somewhere with a lock Jason could probably pick. Maybe, she said. I'll think about it. Fair? 2. He held up a second finger. I know lawyers, good ones. If Jason moves against you legally, if he tries the reputation game and it turns into something with papers and courts, you'll want someone who's seen his kind of move 100 times. I'm not paying for them. I'm just telling you the door exists, and I'll introduce you if you ever want to walk through it. Yes or no? That one, Emily admitted, is smart. I'm occasionally smart. The ghost of that not quite smile again. 3. And this is the important one. He looked at her directly. I'm not going to fight Jason for you, but I'd like to fight beside you if it comes to that. Not in front of you, not instead of you, beside you. You make the decisions. You call the shots. I'm just another set of hands, and a set of hands that happens to know exactly how a man like Jason thinks, because I've been ruining people for a living since before you were old enough to drive. He let that sit. Yes or no? And Emily stood in the cold alley and understood that he had heard her. Every word. He had taken the one thing she'd asked for the difference between beside and instead, and he had rebuilt his entire offer around it. No one had ever done that. Not once in her life had a powerful person adjusted themselves to fit her instead of demanding she fit them. "Yes," she said softly, "beside me. Yes to that one." Something eased in his face. "Then we understand each other," he said. "Now go. You're going to be late, and your manager is already watching you, and I refuse to be the reason." She went. And all through her shift, though, he sat at his corner table exactly as he always did, though nothing outwardly had changed. Everything had changed because for the first time since she was 19 years old, Emily Carter was not facing the man who wanted to own her entirely alone. It took Jason 9 days to make his next move, and it was worse than she expected. She found out on a Thursday afternoon, an hour before her shift, when her phone rang with a number she didn't know, and a woman's voice on the other end introduced herself as a caseworker from the state, calling to follow up on a report. A report about what Emily said her whole body had gone cold. Body. "A welfare concern," the woman said, professional and kind and utterly devastating. "We received information suggesting you may be experiencing a mental health crisis and may be a danger to yourself. We take these reports seriously. I'd like to schedule a time to speak with you and make sure you're safe." Emily gripped the edge of her kitchen counter so hard her knuckles went white. He had reported her, to the state, as unstable as a danger to herself. He had taken the exact lie he had spent 3 years telling her friends, that she was fragile, that she imagined things that she couldn't be trusted, and he had made it official, a file, a record, a thing that existed now in a government computer with her name on it. "I'm not in crisis," Emily said. And even as she said it, she heard how it sounded, heard the way anyone who was in crisis would say the exact same words, and understood the trap all over again. That was the genius of what Jason did. He put you in a box where every move you made to prove you were fine looked exactly like the thing he'd accused you of. "I understand," the caseworker said gently. "May I ask who might be concerned about you?" "Do you have a Jason Miller in your life? He's listed as the reporting party. He says he's your former fiancé and that he's worried about you." "He's not worried about me," Emily said. "Careful, careful. Do not sound upset. Upset is what he wants." "He's harassing me. We haven't spoken in 2 years. He tracked me down after I left him." "I see." A pause, the sound of a pen. "Well, we still have to follow up on any report we receive. That's the law. I'm sure you understand." She did understand. That was the horror of it. She understood exactly. Jason had found the one weapon she couldn't fight with courage or evidence or hard work, a system that had to take him seriously, a machine that would grind forward on his lie, regardless of the truth, and every step of that machine would make her look worse. If she got angry, she was volatile. If she was too calm, she was hiding something. If she brought a lawyer, she was combative. He didn't need to win. He just needed to keep the machine running, because a woman fighting a machine has no time and no energy left to build a life. She hung up the phone and stood in her kitchen, and for one terrible minute felt the old despair rise up in her throat. The 2 years ago despair, the one that whispered, "You should just run again. Run tonight, it's the only thing that works." And then she thought about a man in an alley saying beside you, and she picked her phone back up. Damien answered on the second ring. "He filed a report on me," she said. Her voice was almost steady. "To the state. He said I'm unstable, that I'm a danger to myself. There's a caseworker. There's a file now with my name on it, and I can't make it not exist, and everything I do to prove I'm okay is going to look like proof that I'm not." She took a breath. "You said beside me. I'm calling because I don't know how to fight this one alone, and I'm too proud to have realized that 10 minutes sooner." There was a silence on the line. When Damien spoke, his voice had changed. It was very quiet and very cold, and for the first time she heard underneath the calm the thing that had made an entire city afraid of him. "Say his full name for me," he said, slowly. "Jason Andrew Miller." "And the woman who called you, did she give a name, an office, a case number?" "She did, all of it." "Good. You wrote it down. You're the kind of person who writes things down." She could hear him moving, hear a door close, somewhere on his end. "Emily, Listen to me carefully, because this is the part where I need you to trust the difference you taught me. I am not going to make this disappear. That's not what you asked for, and it's not what you'd want. What I'm going to do is put the right people beside you. A lawyer who's dismantled false reports like this a dozen times, who's going to make sure that file gets marked exactly for what it is, harassment through official channels. Because here's what your Jason doesn't understand. His voice sharpened. He just did something on the record. He put his lie in writing to the government under his own name as the reporting party. For 2 years, he's been careful. He's dealt in whispers and questions and things that can't be proven. And today, because he got impatient, because he thought the system would do his dirty work for him, he finally made a lie you can hold in your hand. He gave you evidence. Emily hadn't thought of it that way. She'd only seen the trap. She hadn't seen that the trap had a door. You really think a lawyer can turn it around? She said. I think a false report filed by a former partner against a woman who left him, who has 14 months of steady employment, and not one incident to her name, is not a weapon. It's a confession. It's a man telling the world exactly what he does to women who leave him in writing with his signature on it. A pause. You just have to survive long enough and stay calm enough to let it become that. Can you do calm? I've been doing calm my whole life, Emily said. It's the only thing I'm good at. No, Damien said. You're good at a great many things. Calm is just the one that kept you alive. He exhaled. The lawyer will call you within the hour. Her name is Diane. She's better than anyone Jason can afford. And before you say it, no, I'm not paying her. She owes me a favor older than you are, and she's been waiting years for a reason to enjoy collecting the other side of it. Say yes. Emily closed her eyes. Beside, not instead. He'd kept the line. Even now, even furious, even holding the power to burn Jason to the ground, with a phone call he'd kept the line she drew. Yes, she said, and Damien. She hesitated. Thank you, not for fixing it, for not fixing it, for handing it back to me with better tools. That's the only kind of help worth giving, he said. It took a waitress in an alley to teach me that. I'm a slow learner, but I learn. And then gentler. Go to work tonight. Do your job. Be exactly who you are. The best thing you can do to a man who's telling everyone you're falling apart is refuse to fall apart. Let him watch you not break. It'll drive him out of his mind. She did go to work. And Diane called during her break, sharp and warm and terrifyingly competent, and by the end of a 20-minute conversation, Emily felt for the first time since the caseworker's call like she was standing on ground instead of sinking into it. But the story was not done turning because Jason Miller was not a man who made one move at a time. It was Katie again who brought her the next piece 3 nights later, cornering her by the coat rack with wide, frightened eyes. Emily, I have to tell you something, and I don't know if I'm supposed to. The girl was nearly in tears. That man, Jason, he came in tonight. He had dinner, and I was serving the next table over, and I heard him on the phone, and Emily, he wasn't talking about you. Katie swallowed hard. He was talking about Mr. Moretti. Everything in Emily went still. What did he say? She said. I couldn't hear all of it. But he said something about how he'd been doing some research, how the great Damien Moretti had a weakness now, and everybody in that world was going to want to know about it. He said a name. Katie's voice dropped to a whisper. He said the name Sophia. And he laughed, Emily. He laughed when he said it. He said, let's see how untouchable he is when the wolves find out what he's protecting. Emily's blood turned to ice. She didn't know who Sophia was. She had never heard the name, but she knew what Katie's words meant, knew it instantly and completely, because she had spent 3 years learning to read the shape of a threat before it fully formed. Jason had stopped trying to fight her directly. Jason had realized that hurting her through the system was slow, that Damien's lawyer had blunted his first blade. So Jason had done what Jason always did when a direct path was blocked. He'd found the flank. He was no longer just coming for Emily. He had started digging into Damien, and he had found something. A name. A weakness. Something the most feared man in Chicago had spent his whole life keeping buried. Something that could bring the wolves of that dark world down on him and Jason Miller, who had no idea what he was truly playing with, who thought this was just another game of reputation, and ruin was about to say it out loud to the wrong people for no reason other than to hurt the man who had dared to stand beside the woman Jason believed he owned. "Katie," Emily said slowly, "did he see you? Does he know you heard?" Katie shook her head. "I don't think so. I just took the plates and left." "Okay." Emily's mind was racing now, faster than it had in years, all the old survival instincts firing at once, but this time not for herself. "Okay, you did the right thing telling me. Don't tell anyone else. Don't act different around him if he comes back. Just be normal. Can you do that?" "I think so." Katie's chin trembled. "Emily, is Mr. Moretti in danger?" Emily looked at the frightened 19-year-old, and she thought about the man in the alley who had learned slowly and clumsily and sincerely to hand her back her own life. She thought about how he had spent years by his own quiet admission, protecting everyone except himself. She thought about the way he'd said, "No one has ever said that to me," like a man who had been starving so long he'd forgotten what food was. And she thought about the name Sophia and the laugh and the wolves. "Go home, Katie," she said gently. "I'll take care of it." The words came out of her mouth before she had time to be surprised by them. "I'll take care of it." For 2 years she had been the one being hunted, the one who ran, the one who needed protecting and refused it out of hard-won fear. And now, standing by a coat rack with her heart pounding, she realized the ground had shifted entirely beneath her feet. Because somewhere in this city was a dangerous, lonely man who had guarded a secret named Sophia his whole life, a man who had just learned to trust that a person could stand beside him without wanting to cage him, and that man had no idea that his own weakness was about to be dragged into the light by a monster from her past. He had stood beside her when she needed it. She was not going to let him face this alone. Emily pulled out her phone, and her hands were not shaking, and she dialed his number, and when he answered with his low, calm voice, she did not waste a single word. "Damien," she said. "Who is Sophia?" The silence on the other end of the line was so complete, so absolute, that for a moment she thought the call had dropped. And then she heard him breathe one slow breath, the breath of a man who has just heard the one question he has spent his entire life praying no one would ever ask. "Where did you hear that name?" he said, and his voice was not calm anymore. "From Jason," Emily said. "He's been researching you. He found something. He said your name and that name in the same breath, and he laughed, and he said he was going to tell the wolves what you're protecting." She gripped the phone. "So whoever Sophia is, whatever she is to you, you need to know that Jason knows. And Jason is about to make it everyone's business. And I'm not calling to be handled or protected or told to stay out of it. I'm calling because you stood beside me, and now it's my turn. And I need you to trust me the way you asked me to trust you." For a long, long moment, Damien Moretti said nothing at all. And when he finally spoke, his voice was so quiet, she had to press the phone hard against her ear to hear it, and what he said made the floor drop out from under her. "Sophia," he said, "is my sister." "You said your sister was dead," Emily whispered. "The night at the restaurant when everything happened, you said your enemies killed your younger sister years ago. You said that was why you push people away." "I know what I said." His voice cracked just slightly, the first crack she had ever heard in it. "I've told that story for 11 years, to everyone, to my enemies, to my friends, to the men who work for me, to the whole city. Sophia Moretti is dead. Everyone believes it. Everyone has always believed it." He stopped. She could hear him struggling with something enormous. "It's the most important lie I have ever told Emily, and I told it to keep her alive, and if Jason Miller is about to tell the world she's breathing, then he has just done something so much more dangerous than either of you understands, and I need you to get somewhere safe right now tonight, because the moment that lie breaks, everyone I have ever crossed is going to come looking, and they are not going to care who happens to be standing next to me when they do." Emily did not go somewhere safe. She went to him. She told Peterson she was sick, that she had to leave, and for once she didn't care how it looked, didn't care about the file or the watching or the seed Jason had planted in her manager's mind. She walked out into the cold and she called Damien back, and she said one thing. "Tell me where you are." "Emily, I told you to get somewhere safe." "You told me a lot of things in the last 5 minutes," she said. "You told me your dead sister is alive. You told me the most dangerous man in your world is about to become the most hunted, and you told me to run and hide while you deal with it alone." She stopped on the sidewalk, phone pressed to her ear, breathing hard. "I've heard that last one before, Damien. A man tells a woman to stay somewhere safe so he can handle the dangerous part himself, and it always, always ends the same way, with her powerless and him deciding everything." Her voice softened but did not waver. "You taught me the difference. Beside, not instead. So don't you dare put me back in the safe little room. Tell me where you are." There was a long silence, then he told her. 20 minutes later, she was standing in a place she had never expected to see. A quiet building on the north side that looked from the street like nothing at all, and inside was Damien Moretti without his armor. She had only ever seen him composed, controlled, every gesture measured. Now he was pacing. His tie was gone. His hands would not stay still. And when he looked at her standing in his doorway, having come toward the danger instead of away from it, something moved across his face that she had never seen there before. "You came?" he said. "You sound surprised." "Everyone runs from this part." He said it simply. "Everyone. The second the world gets dangerous people, I've paid people, I've protected people who swore they'd die for me. They find reasons to be somewhere else. It's the natural order. I don't blame them." He looked at her. "You're the first person in 11 years who walked toward it." "Then tell me what I walked into," Emily said. "All of it. Not the version you tell the wolves, the true one. If I'm going to stand beside you, I need to know what we're standing in front of." And so Damien Moretti, for the first time in over a decade, told the truth out loud. Sophia was his younger sister, 11 years younger, the baby of the family, the only person in the world he had ever loved without complication. When their parents died, he had raised her more than any brother should have to, and he had done it from inside a life that was already turning dark, already pulling him into the business that would eventually make the whole city afraid of his name. He had tried to keep her clean of it. He had tried to keep her separate, protected, ordinary. And for a while it worked. And then 11 years ago, his enemies had taken her. Not killed, taken. To use against him, to control him, to bring the untouchable Damien Moretti to his knees. And for 3 days he had done things to get her back that he would not describe, not even now, not even to Emily. And when it was over and she was free, he had understood one terrible truth with total clarity. As long as the world knew Sophia Moretti existed, as long as she was known to be his weakness, she would never be safe. She would be a target for the rest of her life. Every enemy he ever made, and he made them constantly, would look at her and see leverage. So he had killed her. Not really. On paper, in the story. He had staged her death so completely, spent so much money, and called in so many favors, and buried the truth so deep that the entire world came to believe that Damien Moretti's beloved sister had died at the hands of his rivals. He grieved publicly. He built the legend of the man whose enemies had murdered his family, the man with nothing left to lose, and that legend had protected him for 11 years, because a man with nothing left to lose is the most frightening kind of man there is. And all that time Sophia had been alive, living quietly under a different name in a different city with a family of her own, now a husband who didn't fully know 2 children who had never met their uncle. Safe, free, ordinary. Everything he had wanted for her. He saw her twice a year, carefully, secretly arriving alone and leaving alone, and those 2 visits were the only times in his entire life that Damien Moretti was simply a man and not a monster. "That's the secret," he said quietly. "That's what I've spent 11 years and more money than you can imagine protecting. Not a business, not a stash of money. A woman with 2 kids who thinks the worst part of her life is behind her." He looked at Emily, and his eyes were wet, and he did not try to hide it. "And your Jason Miller, poking around in my life like a boy turning over rocks, has found the one rock that matters. He doesn't understand what he's holding. He thinks it's gossip. He thinks it's leverage over me, a scandal, a way to embarrass the man who humiliated him in front of a room. He has no idea that the second he says her name to the wrong person, he signs her death warrant. And her children's. Emily felt the full horror of it settle over her. "He'd sell it," she said slowly. "That's what he does. He doesn't keep secrets, he trades them. He'd find the people who'd pay the most for it, or the people who'd be most grateful, and he'd hand it over like it was nothing to make himself important, to buy himself friends to hurt you." She pressed her hand to her mouth. "And your enemies would take her." "Yes, because of me." The realization hit her like a physical blow, and she took a step back. "He only dug into you because of me. He only found her because you stood next to a waitress at a charity event. If you'd never noticed me, if you'd never asked me to dance, Sophia would still be safe. This is my fault. I brought this into your life. I brought him." And this was the moment Emily expected the shift. This was the moment in every version of the story she had ever lived where the powerful man's warmth turned cold, where the protection curdled into blame, where she learned once again that a man's kindness lasts exactly up until the moment you cost him something. She braced for it. She had spent her whole life bracing for it. It didn't come. Damien crossed the room and stood in front of her and took her by the shoulders gently and looked her dead in the eyes. "Listen to me," he said. "Listen. This is not your fault. Do you understand? Jason Miller is not a weather event. He's not something that happens to you like rain. He's a man who makes choices, and every choice he's making is his. You didn't bring him. He came. You didn't hand him Sophia. He went looking." His grip tightened just slightly. "You spent 3 years being taught that everything bad in your life was your fault, that you were the problem, that you brought disaster wherever you went. That was the lie he built. Don't you dare finish building it for him." His voice dropped. "I noticed you because you're worth noticing. I asked you to dance because you're the first person in years who made me feel like a man. Those aren't mistakes. Those aren't the things that got Sophia in danger. Jason is what got Sophia in danger. Only Jason." Emily stared at him, and something in her chest that had been clenched tight for 2 years, maybe for her whole life, loosened just slightly. "You really believe that," she said. "I've never been more sure of anything." He let go of her shoulders. "Now, we don't have time for you to hate yourself, and I don't have time to convince you not to. So I'm going to ask you to table it, and we're going to figure out how to stop a man who's holding a match over everything I love. Can you do that?" "Yes," she said. And then, because it was true, "I'm good in a crisis. It's the calm part, remember. It's the thing that kept me alive." Something like pride crossed his face. "Then let's use it." But even as they began, the clock was already running, and neither of them knew how little time was left. Because Jason Miller had not been sitting still. Jason had spent the last 2 days doing exactly what Emily feared, quietly reaching out, making calls, feeling for the people who might want to know that the legendary Damien Moretti had a living, breathing weakness. And Jason, for all his cruelty, was not stupid. He understood he was holding something valuable. He just didn't understand how valuable or how dangerous, or that the people he was so casually shopping his secret to were not businessmen at all. The call that changed everything came at 11:40 that night. Damien's phone rang a number he knew, and he answered it, and Emily watched his face turn to stone. He listened for a long time. He said almost nothing. And when he hung up, he set the phone down very carefully on the table, the way a man sets down something he's afraid he might otherwise throw. "What?" Emily said. "What is it?" "That was a man who owes me a great deal," Damien said quietly. "A man who hears things. He called to warn me because he's afraid of me, which is the only reason anyone tells me anything." He looked up at her. "Jason has been careless. He's been asking around about Sophia, and he's been doing it in places he thinks are safe, and one of those places was not safe at all. Word has already started to move. It's early. It's a whisper, a rumor, a question. Is it true Moretti's sister is alive? Nothing confirmed. Not yet." His jaw tightened. But once a question like that is in the water, it doesn't go back out. The wrong people are already starting to wonder. And the moment one of them decides it's worth confirming, they'll do the one thing that confirms it. They'll go looking for her. And if they go looking, they might find her before I can move her. "Then move her now," Emily said. "Tonight, get her out." "I'm trying." His voice was tight with a fear she had never heard from him. "I have people going to her tonight. Quietly. To bring her and the children somewhere safe until this passes. but it takes time to do it right. And if I do it wrong, if I move too fast and too loud, I lead the wolves straight to her myself. 11 years of keeping her invisible, and I could undo it all in one panicked night." He dragged a hand down his face. "For the first time in a very long time, Emily, I'm not sure my power is enough. Money moves fast, but it's not faster than a rumor with a head start." Emily was quiet for the moment, thinking the calm settling over her, the way it always did when everything was worst. "Then we don't just move Sophia," she said slowly. "We deal with the source. The rumor has a head start, but the rumor is still just a question. Is it true? Nobody's confirmed it. And the only person who can confirm it, the only one holding actual proof, is Jason." She looked at him. "If we can get to Jason before he sells it, before he hands over whatever evidence he found, then the rumor stays a rumor, unconfirmed. And unconfirmed rumors about Damien Moretti die all the time, don't they? People are too afraid of you to chase a maybe." Damien looked at her, and something sharpened in his eyes. "That's exactly right," he said. "A question fades. Proof doesn't. If Jason still has whatever he found, and he hasn't handed it over yet, then the whole thing is still reversible." He paused. "But that means getting to Jason, and Jason wants nothing on this earth more than he wants you. If you come anywhere near him, you're walking straight into the one thing he's been trying to arrange for 2 years." "I know," Emily said quietly. "Emily, I know." She met his eyes. "I know exactly what I'd be walking into. I know him better than anyone alive, and that's exactly why it has to be me, isn't it? He won't meet with you. He's terrified of you now. He knows what you are. But he'd meet with me in a heartbeat. He'd meet with me because he can't imagine me as anything but prey. He thinks I'm the frightened girl who ran. He'd never see me coming because in his head I'm not capable of coming at all." She swallowed. "That's the one advantage we have. He underestimates me. He always has." "No," Damien shook his head. "Absolutely not. I am not sending you into a room with that man. Do you understand what he'd do?" "I understand better than you," Emily said sharply, and there was steel in it now. "I lived it for 3 years, and here's what you don't understand, Damien, because you've spent your whole life being the most dangerous thing in every room. You don't know what it's like to win by being underestimated. I do. It's the only way I've ever won anything. Jason has never once, not for a single second, believed I was a threat to him. That is a weapon. It's the only weapon I've got, and you want me to throw it away and hide in a safe room while you try to muscle a problem that can't be muscled." She stepped closer to him. "You stood beside me. Now stand beside me while I do the thing only I can do." They stood there, the two of them, at an impasse, and Emily watched the war on his face, watched the man who had spent 11 years protecting everyone he loved by shutting them behind walls, being asked to do the one thing that terrified him more than any enemy, to let someone he cared about walk into danger of her own free will. "If anything happens to you," he said finally, and his voice was rough, "I will burn this entire city down, and I won't feel bad about it." "Nothing's going to happen to me," Emily said, "because this time I'm not alone. This time there's a man who knows exactly how people like Jason think, waiting right outside the door, ready to move the second I need him. Beside me, not instead of me." She almost smiled. "You said you'd be another set of hands. I'm about to need them." And so a plan took shape fast in the small hours of that terrible night. And it was Emily's plan built on the one thing she understood better than anyone, the psychology of a man who needed to feel like he owned her. She would contact Jason. She would tell him she was tired of running, tired of fighting, that his campaign had worked, that she was ready to talk about coming back, about making everything look fine the way he wanted. And Jason, whose whole obsession was the fantasy of her surrender, would not be able to resist it. He would agree to meet. And when he did, she would get him talking, get him bragging, because Jason could never resist bragging when he thought he'd won, and somewhere in that bragging, he would reveal what he had on Sophia and where he kept it, and Damien's people listening would move. It was thin. It was dangerous. It depended entirely on Jason being exactly the man they both knew him to be. But it was the only card they had, and the clock was running out. Emily made the call at 1 a.m. Jason answered on the 4th ring, his voice thick with sleep, and then when he heard hers, suddenly horribly awake. "Well," he said. "Emily Carter. I was starting to think you'd never call." "You win, Jason," she said, and she made her voice small, made it tired, made it sound like the girl he remembered. It cost her something to do it, to reach back into that self she'd worked so hard to leave behind. But she did it because Sophia's children were somewhere in the city not knowing that a stranger's phone call had put them in danger. "You were right. I can't hide forever. I'm tired. I just want it to stop. I want to talk about how to make everything okay again." There was a silence, and in it she could hear him savoring it, this thing he'd wanted for 2 years, and she felt sick. "I knew you'd come around," Jason said softly. "I always knew. You just needed to remember who takes care of you." A pause. "But not on the phone. I want to see your face when you say it. Come to me. Tomorrow. I'll text you where." "Okay," Emily whispered. "And Emily." His voice changed just slightly, and something in it made her go cold. "Come alone, because I know about your new friend, Mr. Moretti. I've learned some very interesting things about Mr. Moretti." He laughed softly. "In fact, I've learned something about him that's going to make me a very important man very soon. So if you're thinking of bringing him or bringing anyone, don't. This is between us, just like it always was." The line went dead. Emily lowered the phone slowly, and when she looked up at Damien, her face was pale. "He knows about you," she said. "He knows we're connected, and he all but told me he's already found a buyer for whatever he has on Sophia. He said it's going to make him important very soon." She swallowed hard. "Damien, I don't think we have until tomorrow. I think he's going to sell it the second he thinks he's safe. The only reason he hasn't yet is that he wants to see me surrender first. He wants both prizes. He wants to hand over Sophia and get me back, and he wants to do it in that order, so I'm there to see how powerful he's become." Damien's face had gone very still. That stillness, she now knew, meant the machine behind his eyes was working at full speed. "Then his greed is the flaw," he said quietly. "He could sell it tonight and be safe. But he won't, because he wants you there first. He wants the full victory. His need to own you is the only thing standing between Sophia and the wolves." He looked at her. "You were right. It has to be you. God help me, it has to be you. His obsession with you is the one thing keeping that secret in his pocket instead of in the wrong hands." "Then let's not waste the window," Emily said. But before either of them could move, Damien's phone rang again. It was the second call of the night, and Emily would remember for the rest of her life the way his face changed as he answered it, the way the color drained from it, the way the powerful, controlled, untouchable Damien Moretti suddenly looked like a man watching the ground open under his feet. "Say that again," he said into the phone. His voice was barely a whisper. "Say it again slowly." Emily's heart was pounding. He listened, and then he closed his eyes, and when he opened them they were wet and full of a terror so raw and so total that Emily felt her own breath stop. "The people I sent," he said, lowering the phone, not looking at her, looking at nothing. "The people I sent tonight to move Sophia and the children somewhere safe." "What about them?" Emily whispered. "Damien, what about them?" "What?" "They got there an hour ago," he said. His voice broke completely now. "The house was already empty. The door was open. Her car is still in the driveway. Her children's toys are still on the floor." He looked up at Emily, and the most feared man in the city looked in that moment like a lost and broken brother. "Someone got to her first. Sophia's gone. They already took her." For a moment, neither of them moved, and the silence in that room was the loudest thing Emily had ever heard. Then Damien's control shattered. She watched it happen, watched the man who had spent 11 years holding himself together with sheer will finally come apart. And it was terrible, because there was no rage in it. Not at first. There was just a sound low in his throat, the sound of a man who had done everything right, spent everything he had built, a fortress of lies, 11 years thick, and watched it fail anyway, at the one moment it mattered. He put both hands flat on the table and leaned on them, and his shoulders shook, and Emily understood she was seeing something almost no one alive had ever seen. Damien Moretti afraid, Damien Moretti grieving, Damien Moretti helpless, And then just as fast, the grief hardened into something else, something colder and more focused, and when he lifted his head, his eyes were dry and flat and murderous. "Who?" he said. "Who took her? He'll tell us who has her before I'm done with him. And then every single person involved is going to learn what happens to people who touch my family." "Damien," Emily crossed to him. "Damien, stop. Look at me. I'll find them. I have people. I'll turn this whole city over until—" "Look at me." She grabbed his arm and he stopped, and she made him look at her. "You go out there like this blind and furious and you'll get her killed. You know that. You taught me that. Panic is loud and loud gets people found and gets people hurt. You said it yourself not 4 hours ago. If you move too fast and too loud, you lead the wolves right to her." Her voice was steady, the calm coming over her like it always did when everything was on fire. "They took her an hour ago. They haven't hurt her. If they wanted her dead, she'd already be dead. They took her alive, which means she's worth more to them alive, which means we have time. Not much, but some. And we are not going to waste it screaming." He stared at her chest, heaving, and slowly, the animal in his eyes retreated just enough. "How are you so calm?" he said. It came out almost accusing. "They have my sister." "Because I've been the one they were coming for," Emily said quietly. "For 3 years I was Sophia. I was the thing a dangerous man had decided he owned, the thing he'd hurt anyone to keep. And I learned that the only way to survive being the prize is to stop panicking and start thinking, because the people who love you will lose their minds trying to save you, and someone has to keep a clear head, and it might as well be the one who's used to it." She squeezed his arm. "So let me keep the clear head, just this once. Let me be the calm for you the way you were the strength for me." Something broke open in his face, something grateful and disbelieving all at once. "All right," he whispered. "All right, tell me what you see." Emily let go of his arm and started to pace, and now the pieces were moving fast in her mind, faster than they ever had, because she had spent 2 years running the machinery of a predator's mind, and she knew how this fit together. "Timing," she said. "It's all wrong. Think about the timing." She turned to him. "Jason called me 2 hours ago. He was gloating. He said he'd found something that was going to make him important, and he told me to come to him tomorrow, come alone, and talk about surrendering. He wanted the meeting first. He wanted to hand over Sophia and get me back in that order so I'd be there to watch his big moment." She stopped. "But someone took Sophia an hour ago, after Jason and I talked. Damien, if Jason had already sold her, already handed her over, why would he still be waiting to meet me tomorrow? Why would he still be playing the long game if he'd already cashed in the prize?" Damien's brow furrowed. "You think it wasn't Jason?" "I think Jason lost control of it." Emily's voice sharpened as it came together. "That's what men like Jason never understand. They think they're the dangerous ones. They think they're playing the game. But Jason isn't a predator, Damien. He's a small, cruel man who found himself holding something that belongs in a much bigger, much darker world, and he had no idea what he was actually holding." She pressed her hands to her temples. "He went around asking questions. He put the rumor in the water. Remember your friend told you? Is it true? Moretti's sister is alive. Jason was shopping it, trying to find a buyer, trying to feel important. And someone he talked to didn't want to buy it. Someone he talked to just took it, took the information, cut Jason out entirely, and went and grabbed Sophia themselves. Because why pay Jason for a secret, when you can just use the secret and keep all the leverage yourself?" Damien went very still. "The wolves didn't wait to be sold the meat. They followed the smell to the source. And Jason has no idea," Emily said. "That's the part that matters. Jason is still sitting somewhere tonight thinking he's the one holding all the cards, thinking he's going to make me surrender tomorrow and then sell your sister at his leisure. He doesn't know she's already gone. He doesn't know someone played him. He still thinks he's the most dangerous man in this story." She looked at Damien. "Which means Jason still knows something we need. He knows who he talked to. He knows every single person he shopped that secret to. He doesn't know one of them took her, but he knows their names. And their names are the only trail we have to whoever has Sophia right now." The room went silent again, but it was a different silence now, a working one. "That's the thread," Damien said slowly. "Jason's the only one who knows the list of people who heard the rumor. One of them took her. Get the list and we narrow it to the ones with the reach to actually do it, and we find her." He looked at Emily with something like awe. "You just took the worst night of my life and found the one door in it." "It's what I'm good at," Emily said. "Finding the door. I spent 3 years looking for one." But even as she said it, the weight of what came next settled on both of them, because the thread led straight back to the one place Damien had sworn he would never let her go. "It still means Jason," he said quietly. "It still means you in a room with him. And now it's worse because now we can't just get him talking about Sophia. We need the full list. We need him to brag about everyone he shopped it to, and we need to do it fast tonight before whoever has Sophia decides she's worth more to them dead than alive." He shook his head. "I can't ask you to do that. Not now. Not with the stakes this high." "You're not asking," Emily said. "I'm offering. There's a difference. You taught me that too." She almost smiled. "Besides, the plan just got easier, not harder. I don't have to lie to him about surrendering anymore. Jason loves to brag. Jason cannot help himself. All I have to do is show up looking beaten, tell him he won, and let him do the one thing he's never once been able to resist: show off. He'll tell me everything, every name, every clever move, because in his head there's no one to hide it from. I'm just the girl who finally came crawling back." Her jaw tightened. "He's going to hand us the list without ever knowing he did it, and he's going to do it because he can't imagine me as anything but small." Damien looked at her for a long moment. "When this is over," he said, "I am going to spend a very long time making sure you understand exactly how far from small you are." "When this is over," Emily said, "I might let you." They moved fast after that, and the plan reshaped itself in the space of 20 minutes into something leaner and more dangerous. Emily would text Jason that she couldn't wait until tomorrow, that she needed to see him tonight, that she was falling apart and ready to give in. Jason's ego would eat it whole. A woman too broken to even wait until morning coming to him in the middle of the night. That was the fantasy he'd been feeding for 2 years. He would tell her where. And Damien, with the people he trusted most, would be close listening ready, while Emily sat across from the man who had spent 3 years trying to erase her and got him to talk himself empty. But there was one thing Damien insisted on, and on this he would not bend. "You wear this," he said, and he pressed something small into her hand, a device no bigger than a button. "Not so I can control you, so I can hear you. The second something goes wrong, the second he touches you, the second I hear one thing I don't like, I'm through that door, and I will not be gentle." He closed her fingers around it. "This isn't me instead of you, Emily. This is me beside you close enough to move. That's the deal. That's the only version of this I can survive." Emily looked down at the small device in her palm and then up at him. "Beside me," she agreed softly. "Close enough to move." She sent the text at 2:15 in the morning. "I can't wait. I need to see you tonight. Please, I'm not okay. Tell me where." Jason answered in 90 seconds. She could almost feel his hunger through the phone. He gave her an address, a building he owned downtown, an office suite on a high floor empty at this hour. Private controlled, exactly the kind of place a man like Jason chose, so that he would have all the power and she would have none. It was the same instinct that had run their entire relationship. Always his ground, always his rules, always a room where he held every key. "I don't like it," Damien said, looking at the address. "A building he owns, his territory, his cameras, his locks, his people, if he has any." "Of course it's his building," Emily said. "It was always going to be his building. He needs to feel like he's holding all the power. And that's fine, Damien. Let him feel it. A man who feels completely in control is a man who talks too much. His arrogance is the whole plan." She took a breath. "The more powerful he feels, the more he'll tell me. Let him have his throne room. We just need him to sit on it and gloat." They drove downtown in the dark, and Emily sat in the passenger seat, turning the small listening device over and over in her fingers. And Damien drove in silence, his knuckles white on the wheel, and once at a red light, he reached over without a word and put his hand over hers, just for a moment, just to still it. She let him. Neither of them said anything. There was nothing to say that the gesture didn't say better. 2 blocks from the building, he stopped the car. "This is as close as I can get without him seeing," he said. "From here you walk. And Emily," he turned to her, "I need you to hear me say this once in case God forbid something happens and I don't get to say it again." His voice was rough. "You walked toward the danger when everyone else runs. You kept your head when I lost mine. You found the one door in the worst night of my life. Whatever happens in that room, you are the bravest person I have ever known, and I have known some very hard people." He paused. "Go get my sister's name back, and then come back to me. Both of those, in that order." Emily's throat was tight. "Beside me," she whispered, "the whole time." The whole time. She got out of the car, and she walked the 2 blocks alone into the building, past the sleeping lobby, into the elevator, up and up and up, and with every floor, the old fear rose in her. The body remembering the animal, remembering everything in her screaming, that she was walking back into the mouth of the thing that had nearly swallowed her once already. She pressed the small device deeper into her palm and thought about a man 2 blocks away who was listening, who was close enough to move, and she made herself keep breathing. The elevator opened. Jason was waiting. He stood in the center of the empty office suite, a glass of something amber in his hand, and he was smiling. And the smile was worse than any threat, because it was so pleased, so certain, so completely convinced that the universe had finally arranged itself the way it always should have. "There she is," he said softly. "There's my girl." Emily made herself walk toward him. She made her shoulders round. She made her eyes drop. She reached back into the girl she had been and put that girl on like an old coat, and she hated every second of it, and she did it perfectly. "Jason," she said, "I'm tired. I'm so tired." "I know you are." He set down his glass and spread his arms magnanimous, a king receiving a penitent. "I know. You've been fighting so hard for so long, and for what? Look at where it got you. Pouring drinks, hiding in a little apartment, running from the one person who ever actually took care of you." He shook his head, gentle, disappointed. "You could have just come home 2 years ago and saved us both all this trouble." "I know," Emily whispered. "Get him talking. Feed the ego. Make him big. I know that now. I was scared. I did something stupid." "You did a lot of stupid things." Jason walked a slow circle around her, and she made herself stand still and let him, though every nerve in her body screamed. "Running to Chicago, changing your hair like that would fool anyone, getting mixed up with—" And here his voice curdled with a jealousy he couldn't quite hide. "With him, with Moretti. Do you have any idea how humiliating that was for me to find you finally, after everything, and see you playing house with some gangster?" "He's nothing," Emily said quietly. "He's nobody. Please, Jason, I just want it to stop." And she watched it work. She watched him swell. She watched the jealousy transform into triumph as he decided in real time that he had won, that Moretti had been beaten, that the girl was his again, and the powerful rival had been reduced to nothing. It was intoxicating to him. She could see it. And an intoxicated man is a careless one. "Nothing," Jason repeated, savoring it. "You have no idea, Em. You have no idea how right you are. That man is about to be so much less than nothing." He laughed, and it was the laugh Katie had described, ugly and delighted. "I found something out about your Mr. Moretti, something nobody knows, something that's going to bring his whole kingdom down around his ears and make me a very rich, very important man in the process." This was it. This was the door. Emily kept her eyes down and her voice small. "What do you mean?" she whispered. "His sister," Jason said, and the pride in his voice was obscene. "The great tragic Damien Moretti, whose enemies killed his little sister. Except they didn't. She's alive, Em. Alive and hiding under some fake name with a husband and 2 kids, and nobody in that whole terrifying underworld of his has any idea. 11 years he's kept it buried. And I found her." He tapped his own chest. "Me. A few $1,000s and the right questions, and I found the one thing that man loves in this world. Do you know what that's worth to his enemies? Do you have any idea what people would pay for that?" Emily's heart was pounding so hard she was sure the device could hear it. "Keep going. Names. We need the names." "Who?" she breathed. "Who would you even sell something like that to?" And Jason, drunk on victory, drunk on the sight of her broken and small, and hanging on his every word, told her. He told her all of it. He named the men he'd approached, 3 of them, careless, casual names dropped like he was listing restaurants men he'd reached out to in the last week to feel out who'd pay the most for the location of Sophia Moretti. He bragged about how clever he'd been, how careful, how he'd played them against each other. And Emily stood there with her eyes down and her heart screaming and memorized every single syllable because somewhere 2 blocks away a man was listening, and one of those 3 names was the person who had walked into an empty house tonight and taken his sister and her children. "You've been busy," Emily said softly, and she almost couldn't keep the tremor out of her voice, but she made it sound like awe instead of terror. "You always were the smart one." "I always was." Jason stepped closer and his hand came up and he tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, and it took everything Emily had not to flinch away, not to scream, not to break the mask. "And now, you're finally seeing it. It's a shame, really. If you just understood this from the start, none of the last 2 years had to happen." His thumb traced her jaw, possessive, gentle, and the gentleness was the worst part. It was always the worst part. "But we can fix that now. You're going to come home, and this time, you're not going to get any strange ideas about leaving, because this time, I'm going to make sure you understand exactly how much I can take away from the people who help you." His voice dropped. "Your little manager, that teenage waitress who's been whispering in your ear, Moretti himself. I can reach all of them, Em, so you're going to be very, very good." And there it was, the whole of him laid bare. Not love, never love. Just the endless, bottomless need to own, to control, to make her small enough to hold. 2 years ago, that threat would have worked. 2 years ago, Emily would have crumbled, would have agreed to anything, because 2 years ago she had been alone and had believed she would always be alone. But she was not alone anymore. And something happened in Emily Carter. In that moment, standing in that cold office with his thumb on her jaw, something that had been building for 2 years, and finally broke the surface. The mask of the beaten girl slipped, not because she lost control of it, but because she chose to let it go. She lifted her eyes and looked Jason Miller full in the face for the first time since she'd walked in, and there was nothing small in them at all. "No," she said. Jason blinked. "What?" "I said no." Her voice was clear and steady and entirely her own. "I'm not coming home. I was never coming home. There is no home, Jason. There's just a cage you built and called love, and I already got out of it once, and I am never ever going back in." She stepped back from his hand. "And I didn't come here tonight to surrender. I came here to get something from you, and you just gave it to me." She watched the confusion on his face curdle slowly into understanding, watched him replay the last 10 minutes, watched the horror dawn as he realized how much he'd said, how much he'd bragged, how completely he'd emptied himself out to a woman he'd been too arrogant to see clearly. "What did you do?" he whispered. "Emily, what did you do?" "I let you underestimate me," she said. "One last time." Jason's face went white, then red, and his hand shot out and seized her wrist hard, really hard this time. Not the casual ownership of the charity event, but the grip of a man who had just felt real power slip through his fingers and was reaching for the only kind he had left. "You're recording this," he snarled. "You brought that gangster into this. He's listening, isn't he? Isn't he?" "Let go of me, Jason." "You stupid little—" He yanked her toward him. "Do you have any idea what you've done? Do you have any idea who I already talked to? They already know Emily. The rumor's already out there. You can't put it back. It doesn't matter what you—" And the elevator doors opened. Emily would remember for the rest of her life the look on Jason Miller's face in the half-second before Damian Moretti crossed the room. She would remember the way all the color drained out of it, the way the grip on her wrist went slack, the way the small, cruel king, who had spent 3 years believing himself the most dangerous thing in every room, finally understood that he had never once in his entire life met true danger until this exact moment. Damian did not run. He did not shout. He crossed the room with a terrible, unhurried calm, and he took Jason's hand off Emily's wrist, one finger at a time, and the strength in it was such that Jason cried out, and then Damian put himself fully between Emily and the man who had hunted her for 2 years. And when he spoke, his voice was so quiet it was almost tender. "You put your hands on her," Damian said, "in front of me. Moretti, listen, we can. I have information. I have things you need. You can't. I know what you have." Damien's voice never rose. "I know exactly what you have and exactly who you told, because she just walked into a room with a man who terrifies her and got you to say every word of it, which is more courage than you've shown in your entire cowardly life." He tilted his head. "You took the one thing I love in this world and you shopped it around this city like a stolen watch. And because you were careless, because you were greedy, because you couldn't stop bragging, someone took her tonight. My sister, her children, gone. Because of a rumor, you started to make yourself feel important." Jason's eyes went wide. "Took her, I never, that wasn't me. I swear to God that wasn't me. I was going to sell it. I know it wasn't you," Damien said. "You're not capable of it. You're not dangerous, Jason. That's the thing you never understood about yourself. You're just cruel. There's a difference and you're about to learn it." He glanced back at Emily and his voice changed entirely gentle, urgent. "Did you get them? The names?" "All 3, Emily said. Her voice was shaking now that it was over, now that she could let it shake. "He gave me all 3. "Then we still have time." Damien turned back to Jason, and whatever was in his face made Jason stumble backward. "You're going to sit down. You're going to tell my associates every single detail of every conversation you had about my sister, and then you're going to answer to the law for the false report you filed, and the stalking and the harassment, because Emily has a lawyer named Diane who has been waiting a very long time for a man exactly like you." His jaw tightened. "You wanted to be important, Jason. Congratulations. You're about to be the most thoroughly investigated man in Chicago." But Emily was barely listening now, because the clock in her head was still running, still counting down, and Sophia was still out there in the dark with strangers, and the names were burning in her mind. "Damien," she said, "the names. We have to move. Now. Which one of them?" And she said the 3 names aloud fast, and she watched Damien's face as she said them, watched him process each one, and on the 3rd name, she watched something happen to him that frightened her more than anything else that night. She watched recognition. She watched the blood leave his face all over again. She watched the most powerful man in the city hear a name and go absolutely, completely still. "Say that last one again," he whispered. She said it again. And Damien Moretti closed his eyes, and when he opened them, there was something in them she had never seen. Not fear exactly, but something older and deeper and far more personal, the look of a man hearing a ghost speak. "That's not one of my enemies," he said quietly. "That name, that's not a rival Emily. That's the man who took Sophia 11 years ago, the first time, the one I thought I destroyed, the one I spent everything to bury." His hands were trembling now. "He's been dead to me for 11 years. I watched him lose everything. I made sure of it. And he's been out there the whole time waiting, and Jason just handed him the one thing he needed to finish what he started." The name hung in the air, and for one long moment, Damien Moretti stood frozen by the weight of 11 years. Then Emily's voice cut through it sharp and clear. "No," she said, "you don't get to do that. You don't get to fall into the past right now. Sophia doesn't have 11 years, Damien. She has tonight." She grabbed his arm the same way she had earlier, and she made him look at her. "You told me panic is loud, and loud gets people hurt. Those were your words. So whatever this man did to you 11 years ago, whatever ghost just walked into this room, you put it down, and you come back to me, and you tell me what we need to know to find her, right now." He stared at her, and slowly the ghost let go of him, and the strategist came back into his eyes. "His name is Aldo Ferrante," Damien said. 11 years ago, he was the biggest thing in this city, and he took Sophia to break me, and I got her back, and then I spent 2 years, and everything I had systematically destroying him, his money, his men, his reputation. I took it all. I left him alive because I wanted him to live with the ruin. His jaw tightened. "That was my mistake. I should have finished it. Because a man who's lost everything and blames you for it doesn't fade away, Emily. He waits. 11 years he's been waiting, and when Jason started asking questions about whether my sister was alive, Ferrante was one of the ghosts still listening. He didn't have to buy the secret. He already suspected. Jason just confirmed it and told him where to look. "Then where does Ferrante take someone he wants to break you with?" Emily said. "Not a random place. He'd take her somewhere that means something, somewhere that says, I'm back and I remember everything. Think Damien. You know how this man thinks. You lived inside his head for 2 years. And she watched him think, watched him claw his way out of grief and into the cold, clear place where he'd survived his whole life. And after a moment, his eyes sharpened. There was a building, he said slowly, by the water. It was his once, his headquarters, the place where he held Sophia 11 years ago. When I destroyed him, I made sure he lost it. It's been empty for years, tied up in the wreckage of everything I took from him. He looked at Emily. He'd take her there. Of course he would. He'd take her to the exact place he held her the first time. It's not just a location to him, it's a message. It's him telling me that nothing I did to him ever mattered, that he's right back where he started, and so is she. His voice went hard. That's where she is. I'd stake my life on it. Then let's go get her, Emily said. Emily. He caught her arm. No, absolutely not. This is Ferrante. This is a man who has spent 11 years dreaming about exactly this. It's going to be the most dangerous place in the city tonight, and I am not walking you into it. And Emily looked at him, and she understood that this was the moment, the real one, the one everything in the last month had been building toward. This was where he found out whether he'd actually learned the thing she'd taught him, or whether under enough pressure he'd revert the way everyone always reverted to the powerful man who put the woman in the safe room and closed the door. Listen to me, she said quietly. You are not sending me into that building, and I'm not asking you to. I know I can't fight men like that. I'm not stupid. That part, the dangerous part, that's yours, and I trust you to do it, and I'll be somewhere safe while you do. She took a breath. But Ferrante isn't just holding Sophia. He's holding 2 children who are terrified out of their minds, who watched strangers take their mother, who don't understand anything about your world. And when this goes the way these things go, when it's loud and violent and everything's on fire, those kids are going to be more scared than they've ever been in their lives. And they are going to need someone who is not a soldier. Someone calm. Someone who knows exactly what it feels like to be the small, helpless person in a room full of dangerous men. Her voice caught. I was that person, Damien. For 3 years, I know how to talk to someone whose whole world just became terror. Let your people handle Ferrante. Let me handle the children, beside you, where I'm useful, not in a safe room pretending I can't help. Damien looked at her for a long, long moment, and Emily watched the war in him, and this time she saw him win it. Beside me, he said hoarsely. Close enough to move. The children are yours. The children are mine, she said. What happened at the building by the water Emily would only ever know in pieces because Damien kept his word and kept her back until the dangerous part was done. She waited in the dark, with her heart in her throat, listening to the small device, hearing the movement and the quiet, and then all at once the chaos, and she stood there with her hands pressed to her mouth and made herself trust him, made herself believe that the man she'd taught to fight beside her, instead of her, could do this one impossible thing. Aldo Ferrante had waited 11 years for that night. He had planned for Damien's rage, for Damien's men, for the full weight of everything the untouchable Moretti could bring. He had planned for the war he expected. He had not planned for the one thing Damien did that Ferrante's entire strategy never accounted for, because Ferrante, like Jason, like every man who had ever underestimated the people around him, believed the danger would come the way he understood danger, from the front, loud and furious, a powerful man's fury. He never imagined that the powerful man would come cold and quiet and precise, that Damien Moretti had spent the drive over doing exactly what Emily had taught him, putting down the rage thinking instead of feeling, and that this Damien, the calm one, the one a waitress had made, was far more dangerous than the raging one Ferrante had spent 11 years preparing for. It was over in minutes. Ferrante had built his whole revenge around breaking a man through fear, and he'd forgotten or never known that a man who has already survived his worst fear cannot be broken by it twice. And then Damien's voice came through the small device, rough and shaking and alive. Emily, it's clear. It's over. Come up. She's asking for the kids won't stop crying, and Emily, I don't know how to do this part. Come up, please. I need you. She was moving before he finished the sentence. She found Sophia first, and she knew her instantly because she had Damien's eyes, and she was holding her two children so tightly her arms were shaking, and she looked up at Emily with the wild, exhausted terror of a mother who had spent hours believing she and her children were going to die. And Emily did the thing she knew how to do. She knelt down, she made herself small and calm and safe, and she talked to the children softly the way someone had never talked to her when she was small and afraid, and slowly she brought them back from the edge of their terror while Sophia watched her with tears streaming down her face. "Who are you?" Sophia finally whispered. Emily looked up and across the room. She found Damien standing there watching her hold his family, watching the waitress he'd asked to dance kneel on the floor and gather up the pieces of the one thing he loved most in the world, and the look on his face was something she would carry for the rest of her life. "I'm a friend of your brother's," Emily said softly. "I'm the one who helped him find you." Sophia looked from Emily to Damien and back, and something passed across her exhausted face, some understanding that ran deeper than the words. "No," she said quietly. "You're not just a friend. I've known my brother my whole life. He's never once in 11 years looked at anyone the way he's looking at you right now." It was 2 hours before dawn when they finally got Sophia and the children somewhere truly safe, and it was another 3 days before the full weight of everything settled and the danger truly passed. Ferrante was finished this time completely, and Emily did not ask how, and Damien did not tell her. And that was the one part of his world she understood. She would always let him keep on his side of a line they both respected. But the rumor, the terrible rumor that Sophia Moretti was alive, that had been the true danger, the thing that could have brought a whole world of wolves down on her forever. And this was the part that mattered most, the part they solved together in the quiet after. Because a rumor, Damien explained, doesn't die on its own. It has to be killed, and the only way to kill the rumor that Sophia was alive was to give the world a more convincing story about why the rumor existed in the first place. So together over long nights, Emily and Damien built one. A careful, deliberate account that traced the whole thing back to its true source, to Jason Miller, a bitter, unstable man with a grudge who had invented a wild story about Moretti's dead sister being alive purely to hurt the man connected to the woman who'd left him. It was, Emily pointed out, the kind of lie that worked precisely because Jason had made it so easy to believe he'd tell it. He'd filed a false report. He'd stalked a woman for 2 years. He had a documented, provable history of inventing damaging stories about people who crossed him. Diane, the lawyer, had built an entire case around it. So the world came to understand that the rumor about Sophia Moretti had been the desperate invention of a disgraced man named Jason Miller, thoroughly discredited, exposed as a stalker and a liar whose word meant nothing. And a rumor started by a proven liar, a rumor with no proof behind it, because the only proof had been recovered and destroyed was a rumor the wolves stopped chasing. Sophia went back into the quiet, invisible again, safe again, free again. Jason Miller lost everything, not through a Mafia boss's phone call, not through the power Damien had once offered to unleash. He lost it through the law, through Diane, through the false report he'd filed, and the stalking he'd committed, and the 2 years of documented harassment, all of it laid out in a courtroom, all of it undeniable. He'd spent his whole life believing that the systems of the world belonged to men like him, that reputation and connections and money would always protect him. And in the end, those same systems turned patiently and legally against him by the woman he'd tried to erase, took his career, his standing, and his freedom. The small, cruel king who had needed so badly to own her was the one who ended up owned by consequences, by the truth, by the record of everything he'd done. And Emily Carter, who had walked into that empty office believing her only weapon was letting a man underestimate her, understood at last that she'd had a far greater weapon all along. She'd never been weak. She had simply survived too much and mistaken survival for smallness. The woman who once believed she had no power had brought down the man who'd controlled her, not by becoming dangerous, but by refusing finally to be afraid. Months passed, and Bella Vita hosted another grand charity event. The second floor opened up, the important people of Chicago filling the room. And it was strange, Emily thought, standing at the edge of it, how the same room could hold 2 such different nights. The last time she'd been here, she'd been an invisible waitress trying to disappear, and a monster from her past had walked in and put his hand on her wrist, and everything had begun. This time, she was not invisible. This time, she was not working. Though she'd insisted on keeping her job at Bella Vita, insisted on it against every offer Damien made because it was hers, because she had earned it, because a woman who has finally learned her own worth does not hand her independence to anyone, not even to a man she has come to love. She still worked her shifts. She still remembered every regular's order. She still slipped bread to the man behind the building after closing. But tonight was her night off, and she'd come as a guest in an elegant dress, and she was not the frightened girl who tried to vanish anymore. She was confident. She was strong. She was free. And across the room, Damien Moretti was watching her, the way he always watched her now, not like an owner counting his possessions, not like Jason ever had, but like a man who could not quite believe his luck, like a man who had spent his whole life protecting everyone except himself, and had finally at long last let someone stand close enough to protect the man behind the monster. He crossed the room to her. The band was playing something slow. He held out his hand. "Dance with me," he said. And Emily Carter looked at his open hand, and she thought about the first time he'd asked the same words in this same room when she'd been so afraid of everyone with power that she'd hidden behind her uniform like a shield. She thought about how far she had come from that terrified girl. She thought about everything they had survived together, the alley and the plan and the office and the building by the water, the whole long journey from instead of to beside. And she looked up at him, and a smile touched her mouth. The old game, the old joke, the moment where it had all begun. "You know I'm working," she said softly. Damien laughed that warm, surprised laugh she'd first heard the night she told him no, the laugh that had let her see the man beneath the legend. "You're not working," he said. "It's your night off. You told me so yourself. 3 times. Maybe I did. Then I've run out of reasons to wait." He kept his hand extended open, no command in it, only the question, only the choice, the same choice he'd learned to give her and never once taken back. "One dance. Because you want to, not because I asked, not because you owe me anything, only if you choose it." And Emily Carter, who had spent her whole life running from men who wanted to own her, who had refused to be saved because she'd finally understood the difference between being rescued and being seen, reached out and took his hand. Not because she needed saving. She had saved herself over and over long before he ever noticed her carrying a tray across a crowded room. Not because she owed him anything. They had settled every debt between them the night she walked toward the danger instead of away from it. But because she chose him. Freely. Completely, as an equal standing beside an equal 2 people who had each spent their lives protecting everyone but themselves, finally learning to be cared for. She stepped into his arms and they danced, and it was the first thing in her entire adult life that Emily had done for no reason at all except that she wanted to, and it was the most free she had ever felt. Their story was never about a powerful man rescuing a broken woman. It never had been. It was about a woman who was never broken, only buried, and who dug herself out with her own 2 hands, and about a man who learned that the truest strength he had was not the power to control the people he loved, but the courage to stand beside them and let them stand on their own. True love, Emily finally understood, is not about saving someone from their life. It is about standing beside them while they build it. And sometimes the strongest people in the world are simply the ones who survive too much too young and who find at long last the courage to let themselves be loved. Emily Carter had been that strong all along. She had just finally stopped running long enough to know it. 1 year later, on a warm evening in early summer, Bella Vita closed its doors to the public for a single private celebration, and the reason for it would have been impossible to explain to the frightened waitress who used to hide in its kitchen. Emily Carter stood in the middle of the dining room she had once tried so hard to disappear inside, and this time she was not carrying a tray, and this time she was not invisible, and this time the entire room had gathered for her. It had been her idea to hold it here. Damien had offered her a dozen grander places, ballrooms and rooftops and private estates, and she had turned down every one of them with the same quiet smile because none of them meant anything. Bella Vita meant everything. This was the room where a dangerous man had once noticed the way she protected younger employees and remembered every order and gave bread to a stranger after closing. This was the room where she had told him no over a dance and watched him laugh instead of punish her. This was the room where her old life had walked back through the door to destroy her, and where, without knowing it yet, she had begun the long climb out of everything that had ever held her down. So it had to be here. If they were going to celebrate the life she'd rebuilt, it had to be in the exact place she'd nearly lost it. Peterson was there, older and grayer and no longer suspicious of her at all, because the truth had come out about Jason long ago, and Peterson had spent the last year quietly ashamed of ever having wondered. He'd apologized to her twice clumsily, and she'd forgiven him both times because she understood better than anyone how a good and tired man could be turned by a clever, cruel one. And because forgiveness, she had learned, was one more thing that belonged to her and not to the person who'd wronged her. Peterson had insisted on personally overseeing the kitchen tonight, as if by cooking for her, he could say all the things he didn't have words for. Katie was there too, 20 now, no longer the frightened teenager who'd whispered warnings by the coat rack. She had become over the past year something like the little sister Emily had never had. Emily had helped her apply to college, had sat with her through the terror of leaving home, had told her on the night before Katie's first day of class the one thing Emily wished someone had told her at 19. You are not small. The people who need you to believe you're small are the ones who are afraid of how large you actually are. Katie had cried, and Emily had held her, and now Katie stood across the room in a dress she'd bought with her own money from her own job, beaming a young woman who had learned early the lesson that had cost Emily so many years. And Sophia was there. That more than anything was the miracle of the night, because a year ago, Sophia Moretti had not existed, not to the world, not officially, not safely. A year ago, she had been a woman living under a false name, hidden so deep that her own children didn't fully know their family, seeing her brother only twice a year in secret. The rumor that had nearly destroyed her had in the end done something none of them expected. Once it was thoroughly discredited, once the world came to believe with total certainty that Sophia Moretti was a dead woman, invented back to life by a lying stalker named Jason Miller, a strange and unexpected freedom had opened up. Because now the truth was safe precisely because no one would believe it. The one story the wolves would never chase was the one they'd already been told was a proven lie. Damien had explained it to Emily one night, marveling at it. This man who had spent 11 years trapped by a lie, finally realizing that the lie's own collapse had set his sister free. Sophia could live now. Not entirely in the open, they were careful. Still, they would always be careful. But she could exist. She could visit. She could stand in a restaurant in Chicago on a summer evening with her children playing at her feet and her brother across the room, and for the first time in over a decade, no one was hunting her. She had cried the first time she'd been able to introduce her children to their uncle, as their uncle out loud using his real name. Damien had held those two children and wept this feared man, this legend undone completely by the simple, impossible gift of being allowed to be family. And it was Emily who had given him that. Emily who had walked toward the danger. Emily who had found the door in the worst night of his life. Sophia had never forgotten it, not for one single day, and over the past year she and Emily had become something Emily had not had since she was a girl and had not dared hope to have again. A sister. A real one. The kind you call when everything falls apart, and the kind you call when everything goes right, and Emily, who had spent so many years with no one at all, sometimes still could not quite believe that her phone now held people who answered. Now Sophia crossed the room to her, took both her hands and looked at her with those eyes so like her brother's. I want to tell you something, Sophia said quietly, and I want to say it before he does because he'll make it about him, and it isn't about him. It's about you. She squeezed Emily's hands. For 11 years I watched my brother turn into a ghost. He kept me alive and I loved him for it, but the cost was that he stopped being a person. He put himself in a prison to keep me out of one. Every year I saw him twice a year in the dark. He was a little more stone and a little less Damien. Her voice thickened. And then you told a Mafia boss no over a dance, and something started coming back. I didn't understand it at first when he'd call me secretly and mention this waitress who wouldn't let him help her, but I understand it now. She smiled through her tears. You didn't save my brother, Emily. You did something harder. You reminded him he was worth saving himself. That's the gift. That's what you gave this whole family. You gave us back a person we'd already grieved. Emily could not speak for a moment. He gave me the same thing, she finally managed. I was a ghost too, Sophia. I'd made myself into furniture that moved. I thought that was safety. She looked across the room at Damien, who was crouched down, letting Sophia's youngest daughter show him something enormously important about her shoe. He looked at me until I remembered I was a person. We pulled each other out of the same grave. We just dug from opposite ends. It was the truest thing she knew how to say about the last 2 years of her life, and Sophia understood it completely. And the two women stood there, holding hands in the middle of the room where it had all begun. The celebration was quiet by the standards of the powerful people who filled it. There were no speeches about business, no display of influence, none of the fearful deference that used to follow Damien everywhere. He had spent the past year deliberately carefully stepping back from the darkest parts of his old life, not all at once. A man doesn't walk out of that world in a day and live to tell about it, but steadily, methodically, the way he did everything. Closing doors quietly behind him until the legend of Damien Moretti began slowly to fade into something smaller and safer and far more human. The city still respected him, but it no longer trembled, and he found to his own surprise that he did not miss the trembling at all. Emily had asked him about it once, whether he mourned the power, whether some part of him missed being the most feared man in Chicago. For my whole adult life, he'd told her, people looked at me and saw something to be afraid of, and I told myself that was the same as being respected, and I told myself respect was the same as being safe, and I told myself safe was the same as being loved. He'd shaken his head. You looked at me and weren't afraid. You looked at me and saw a man. And once someone sees you as a man, you find out you'd rather be a man than a monster. The fear was never protecting me, Emily. It was just keeping everyone far enough away that no one ever found out I was lonely. She'd reached for him then and held him, and neither of them had said anything else, because there was nothing else that needed saying. Now in the warm room with the people they loved gathered around them, Damien rose from where he'd been playing with his niece, and he crossed to Emily, and the room seemed to quiet without anyone announcing it the way rooms do when they sense something is about to happen. "A year ago," he said, and he was speaking only to her. "Though everyone could hear, I stood in this room and asked you to dance, and you told me you were working." "I remember," Emily said softly. "And 6 months before that, I stood in this room and asked you the same thing, and you told me the same thing." A smile touched his mouth. "You've turned me down over a dance more times than any man in this city would survive. You survived. I more than survived." He reached into his coat, and Emily's heart stopped because she saw what was in his hand before her mind caught up to it. "Emily, I spent 11 years believing that the best thing I could do for the people I loved was to keep them at a distance, to handle their problems from the shadows, to protect them by controlling everything around them and never once letting them protect me. And then a waitress in an alley told me my help was a cage." His voice was thick now, this man who never let his voice betray him. "You taught me the difference between beside and instead. You taught me that loving someone isn't about deciding their life for them. It's about standing next to them while they build it. And I have spent this whole year standing beside you, watching you build something extraordinary out of a life that tried to break you, and I don't want to stand beside you as a man who's lucky to be allowed. I want to stand beside you as your partner, fully, openly, for the rest of whatever we get." He went down on one knee in the middle of Bella Vita, the feared Damien Moretti kneeling on the floor of the restaurant where a frightened waitress used to hide, and he opened the small box in his hand. "I'm not asking to save you," he said. "You never needed saving, and we both know it. I'm not asking to protect you. You've protected yourself and me better than anyone I've ever known. I'm only asking one thing, and it's the same thing I asked a year ago, and you get to answer it exactly the way you answered then, and it will still be the right answer because it's yours to give." His eyes were shining. "Emily Carter, will you choose me? Not because you need me, not because you owe me anything, only if you want to." And Emily Carter, who had spent her whole life running from men who wanted to own her, who had refused to be rescued because she'd learned at terrible cost the difference between being kept and being loved, looked down at the man kneeling in front of her, and she thought about how far she had traveled to arrive at this exact spot. She thought about the girl who had gotten off a bus in a strange city 2.5 years ago with a backpack and $400 and a heart so scarred she'd sworn never to let anyone near it again. She thought about how sure that girl had been that safety meant solitude, that love was just a prettier word for a cage, that the only person she could ever rely on was herself. She thought about how that girl would have looked at this room, at these people who loved her, at this man on his knee, asking rather than telling, and she would not have believed a single second of it was possible. And she thought about the most important thing she had learned, the thing that had taken her 3 years of pain and 2 years of running and 1 impossible month of danger to finally understand. She had never been weak. She had simply survived too much, too young, and mistaken the exhaustion of survival for the whole of who she was. But she was more than what she had survived. She always had been. And the proof of it was standing all around her in a room full of people who loved her, none of whom she had let herself have back when she believed she was too small and too broken and too dangerous to be worth loving. "Ask me the other question first," she said softly. Damien blinked, and then understanding crossed his face, and he smiled, and there were tears on it now. This man who had once been the most frightening thing in the city. "Dance with me," he said, and Emily Carter smiled down at him, and this time she did not say she was working because she wasn't, because she never would be again when it came to him, because the only work left between them was the good and lifelong work of 2 people choosing each other every single day. "Yes," she said, "to the dance and to the question after it. Yes, to both. Yes, to all of it." He rose and he slipped the ring onto her finger, and the room erupted. Katie crying, Peterson clapping Sophia's children, shrieking with joy without fully understanding why, and Sophia herself with both hands pressed to her mouth and tears running freely down her face, watching her brother. The ghost she had grieved for 11 years become a living man in front of her eyes. Someone started the music, something slow and warm, and Damien took Emily into his arms in the middle of Bella Vita, in the exact spot where he had first asked, and she had first refused, and they danced. She was not the frightened waitress who tried to disappear. She was not the girl who ran in the middle of the night with a backpack and $400. She was not the woman who believed that needing no one was the same as being safe. She was Emily Carter, and she had survived everything the world had thrown at her, and she had come out the other side not broken but forged, and she had done it herself with her own 2 hands long before anyone ever asked her to dance. The love she'd found had not rescued her. It had simply arrived at long last to stand beside the strong woman she had already become, and to remind her that being strong had never meant she had to be alone. They danced late into the night, and the people who loved them danced too, and somewhere in the middle of it, Emily looked up at the man who had learned to hold her without holding on, and she understood with perfect clarity that this was the thing she had been running toward her whole life without ever knowing it. Not a rescuer, not a protector, not a powerful man to hide behind. A partner, an equal. Someone who had learned as she had learned that the strongest thing 2 survivors can ever do is finally, carefully, completely let themselves be loved. The waitress who once refused to be saved had been right all along. She never needed saving. She only needed to stop running long enough to choose freely, and without fear, the life and the love she had earned every single day, she'd kept surviving. And on a warm summer night in the room where it all began, Emily Carter chose. She chose herself first the way she always had, and then at last, unafraid, she chose him too.